If I am so kind, so loving, why does it hurt so much to be me? A quiet lie passed down through culture, family, media, wrapped in praise disguised as virtue. You've seen it. You might be living it. The person who forgives what should never be ignored, who listens when no one listens back, who gives more when they're already empty. The emotional anchor, the caretaker, the one everyone leans on. They're called selfless, noble, rare. But when the lights go out and the crowd disappears, there they are, sitting in silence, exhausted, hollow, haunted by a question they don't dare ask out loud. This is the unspoken reality behind the empath's identity, a role so often romanticized yet rarely understood, one where your needs vanish beneath other people's comfort, where your silence becomes your safety, where you learn to disappear piece by piece and call it love. If you've ever lost yourself in trying to save others or question why love often feels like suffering, stay with me until the end, because by the final minute, you'll understand not only why it keeps happening, but how to finally break the cycle. What if the version of love you've been taught is actually a blueprint for self-destruction? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the human psyche, had a name for the forces that shape us without our awareness. He called it the shadow, the disowned self, the parts we reject because they seem selfish, angry, flawed, or dangerous. For many empaths, the shadow doesn't look like rage. It looks like the smile they never take off, the boundaries they never set, the pain they never admit. And here's the truth. This isn't a feel-good journey. This is a psychological descent, a raw exploration of why we confuse self-sacrifice with love and what it's costing us, not in theory, in the deepest corners of our emotional lives. Because sometimes the most dangerous cage isn't the one you fight to escape. It's the one you were praised for building. You've been taught that love means giving, that to love deeply is to give without asking, to forgive without limit, to pour your energy into someone else's cup, even when yours is empty. From a young age, maybe you learned that love is something you earn, that if you're kind enough, helpful enough, quiet enough, maybe, just maybe, they'll stay. Maybe they'll see you. Maybe they'll love you back. So you became the listener, the healer, the fixer, the one who always shows up no matter how much it costs you. And the world noticed. They called you strong, compassionate, empathic. But here's what they don't see: how being needed became your drug, how it started to feel safer to be useful than to be vulnerable, safer to serve than to be seen. You may have mistaken their dependence for intimacy, their chaos for connection, their wounds for something you were supposed to fix. It feels like love, but it isn't. It's a performance, a carefully rehearsed act of self-erasure, one where you offer your soul in the hopes that someone might finally notice it's missing. Maybe you've been the friend who always listens but is never truly heard, the partner who gives everything, time, attention, emotion, only to be met with silence, distance, or crumbs of affection. You smile through it, telling yourself that this is what it means to love unconditionally. But underneath, resentment festers, loneliness grows. You begin to wonder why your love never seems to be returned with the same intensity, why your kindness doesn't protect you from disappointment. It's because love built on self-sacrifice isn't love. It's survival. It's a conditioned response, wired into you through trauma, through fear, through the belief that your worth is tied to how much you give. And until that belief is questioned, you'll keep confusing exhaustion for connection. You'll keep acting in a play where you never get to be the main character. Not because others demand it, but because somewhere along the way you were taught that disappearing is what love looks like. Carl Jung once said, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." The shadow is not evil. It is not shameful. It is simply the part of you that you hide, the desires you suppress, the thoughts you disown, the impulses that contradict who you think you're supposed to be. For empaths, the shadow isn't made of violence or greed. It's made of things much more subtle and far more dangerous when left unacknowledged. Anger, the desire to say no, the urge to be selfish, the hunger to be seen, prioritized, even worshipped. The need for control, the craving for power, even if only over one person who finally chooses them back. These are not traits we associate with empathy, yet they live inside many who identify with it. Silently, shamefully, secretly, empaths are often praised for their light, their goodness, their endless capacity to forgive. But this light can become blinding when it refuses to acknowledge the darkness that gives it contrast. When someone over-identifies with being the good one, they disconnect from their wholeness. Their identity becomes fragile, dependent on constant validation. They feel terrified of being seen as selfish, harsh, or emotionally unavailable. So they bury those traits, not realizing that those exact qualities, when owned, when integrated, are the missing pieces of their authenticity. In the name of love, they become martyrs. But martyrdom is often less about love and more about control. If I sacrifice enough, maybe they won't leave. If I give everything, maybe I'll be worthy. If I disappear into their needs, maybe I'll finally feel chosen. This isn't compassion. It's a performance of purity, a survival strategy dressed as virtue, and the shadow watches, waits, builds. Until one day it erupts in bitterness, passive aggression, quiet resentment, or worse, in complete emotional collapse. All because a person tried to live as half of themselves, while the other half watched from the dark. The truth is, every saint carries a shadow. Every healer has a wound. Every empath has a limit. This isn't an accusation, it's an invitation to drop the illusion of perfect goodness and embrace something deeper. Wholeness. To love others without abandoning yourself. To give without turning it into a silent demand. To be kind without being consumed. Because if you don't integrate your shadow, it doesn't disappear. It drives your relationships, it shapes your choices, it turns your love into fear, and the most dangerous part, you'll call it empathy. From fairy tales to viral TikToks, there's a story we've been fed on repeat. A story where love means saving someone, enduring pain, waiting for change, bleeding silently and calling it strength. In romantic media, especially the kind aimed at women and sensitive men, this story is everywhere. The ride or die trope, the soft-hearted girl who loves the emotionally unavailable man until he heals, the misunderstood bad boy who just needs one good woman to save him. The idea that true love is proven not by joy, but by how much you're willing to suffer for someone else. This isn't just fiction, it becomes a blueprint. Social platforms like TikTok and Instagram have amplified it. Hashtags romanticize emotional struggle. Videos go viral showing partners tolerating chaos in the name of loyalty. Stories of emotional pain are packaged as aesthetics. He's broken, but I love him anyway. I stayed even when they pushed me away, and now we're stronger. It all sounds poetic, noble, deep, until you realize what's being praised isn't love, it's emotional self-abandonment. Empaths, already wired to prioritize others, absorb this messaging easily. They come to believe that real love is about surviving pain together, that their role is to stay, to heal, to carry emotional weight that isn't theirs. And if they walk away, they feel guilty, like they've failed some sacred mission. This belief system doesn't just shape personal relationships, it serves larger structures. Compliant, guilt-ridden emotional laborers are incredibly useful to corporations, to political systems, to any machinery that thrives on obedience over self-worth. In the workplace, overgivers are praised but underpaid. In society, those who quietly endure injustice are labeled noble, while those who assert boundaries are shamed as selfish. The glorification of sacrifice creates perfect citizens, people who won't say no, who won't ask for more, who will mistake endurance for virtue and call their own exploitation loyalty. What if empathy has been weaponized? What if the world doesn't actually want you to wake up from this illusion? Because your silence, your labor, your guilt, they're profitable. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a social design, one that trains people to confuse being good with being useful, and being useful with being loved. But usefulness is not love, and the systems that teach you otherwise are not broken. They're functioning exactly as intended. They sit in the quiet after everyone's left. The messages have stopped. The favors are done. The crises managed. Once again, they were the steady hand, the open ear, the one who dropped everything to help. And yet there's no one there to return it. They stare at the ceiling, numb, tired in a way that sleep can't fix. The kind of tired that sinks into the soul. This is the part no one sees. The crash after the care, the ache after the giving. A hollow emptiness that whispers, why does no one show up for you the way you do for them? They don't have an answer, only shame. A quiet voice in the back of their mind says they shouldn't expect anything, that wanting something back makes them selfish, that real love doesn't keep score, so they swallow their needs. Again, but inside resentment brews, not loud, not violent, just a slow drip of bitterness, invisible to others, but heavy, suffocating. It seeps into their relationship, turning affection into obligation, compassion into resentment, until love starts to feel like a trap. It's the cost of chronic self-abandonment. When you give until you disappear, you don't just lose energy, you lose yourself. Piece by piece, you become a stranger behind a smile, a ghost in your own life. And worst of all, you start to believe that you were never meant to be seen, only to serve. Carl Jung warned us, what you do not bring to consciousness will be lived out as fate. If you don't see the pattern, you'll think the world is just cruel. If you don't face the wound, you'll keep repeating the script. If you don't question the urge to overgive, you'll quietly bleed until there's nothing left. Love doesn't have to hurt. Caring for others shouldn't come at the cost of losing yourself. But if you've spent your whole life equating love with sacrifice, the idea of receiving might feel foreign, maybe even wrong. It's not. Wanting to be loved, supported, and chosen, that isn't selfish, it's human. And the moment you admit that, the healing begins. Carl Jung believed that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. He called this process individuation, the slow, often painful transformation of a person into their truest self. Not the self they were told to be, not the self they perform for love or survival, but the self that emerges when the unconscious is made conscious, when the shadow is no longer rejected, but reclaimed. For empaths, this journey is not about abandoning compassion, it's about freeing it from guilt, from performance, from the quiet desperation to be loved through self-erasure. Real healing doesn't begin with more giving. It begins with boundaries, with the radical act of saying no, with letting the pendulum swing the other way, toward the anger you've suppressed, the needs you've ignored, the desires you've silenced to keep others comfortable. Anger, when denied, festers, but when acknowledged, it clarifies. It tells you what's wrong. It reminds you where the line is. It shows you where you've betrayed yourself in the name of being good. Reclaiming your shadow is not a descent into selfishness. It's a return to balance. Practical healing isn't always poetic. It might look like journaling the thoughts you've never said aloud, writing down the parts of yourself you were taught to hide, the jealousy, the rage, the fantasies of being worshipped or chosen first. Let them breathe, let them speak. Confront the guilt that rises when you choose yourself. Don't run from it. Question it. Ask where it came from and who taught you that self-worth must come with suffering. You were never meant to be anyone's emotional savior. That burden is too heavy, and it keeps you small. Let go of the fantasy that your love will heal those who refuse to heal themselves. It's not your job to carry the world on your back. It never was. This process of owning your shadow, confronting your guilt, setting new terms for your love, it's not gentle, it burns. But from that fire, something new rises. The phoenix was never reborn by polishing its feathers. It had to burn, to be destroyed, to shed everything false so that something real could take its place. Your love, once chained to your fear, now becomes something sacred. Not something you trade for worth, not something you use to disappear, but something you give freely without losing your soul in the process. This time, the story ends differently. The empath doesn't stay. They don't wait for another apology that never comes. They don't offer another explanation that goes unheard. They don't pour from an empty cup just to keep the peace. This time, they choose silence, stillness, distance, not out of spite, but clarity. They finally see it, the pattern, the invisible thread that pulled them into the same story over and over again. A story where love meant disappearing, where kindness meant tolerating disrespect, where empathy became a leash. They put it down, not the kind that dominates, the kind that refuses to shrink. Love, they realize, isn't supposed to cost your identity. It's not about bending until you break. It's not about earning connection by surviving pain. Real love doesn't require your disappearance. It invites your presence. All of it. Not just the soft and selfless, but the angry, the flawed, the whole. So ask yourself gently, what if love isn't about losing yourself for someone? What if it's about being seen fully and staying? Like the video if it resonated, and subscribe for more insights grounded in the psychology of Carl Jung. The healing journey is just beginning, and you don't have to walk it alone.